This is an MS Views Now program. I am going to get this thing started. This is a virtual program that we have been doing since 1 week after the world was shut down by the pandemic. And it's been joyful to do these kinds of programs and get people involved. So for anybody online, I'm going to give you a few things to know about. Firstly, yes, I am Stuart Schlossman. I'm the guy that sends you all the emails, right? You can see our supporters are Sanofi, Biogen, Sandoz, Genentech, and Bristol-Myers Squibb. And we want to give them all a round of applause, thanking them for what they do. So tonight's program, we have Jessica Thomas, a licensed clinical social worker, and she will be speaking with you all about a topic that I wanted her to speak about, and that is getting back to the normal, okay? What does it feel like? Are you normal since COVID, since everything shut down? Have you adapted to the changes? What have you done for yourselves? What have you done for your families? Well, Jessica's going to speak with you probably about this and a lot more. She's going to speak with you for about 40, 45 minutes, and then we are going to do the Q&A. Jessica, I'm glad you're back. Take it away.
All right. Good evening, everyone. So when Stuart asked me to do a presentation on this topic, I was more than thrilled because this is something that we're seeing a lot. We're having to have a lot of conversations about. I know in counseling sessions with clients, we're talking a lot about getting back to normal. And we've been talking about COVID and how to adjust to COVID and the changes that have been in our lives over the past couple of years. So before I get started, I just always like to share, like Stuart, I am an MS patient. So I'm somebody living with MS, and as well as I am a licensed clinical social worker, and I work with people that are living with neurological disease. But we are going to talk a little bit today about getting back to normal, and we're going to talk about it in the sense of stages. Now, these are not any formal stages of really, or any model of stages or anything. These are just topics that I thought, themes that I thought were pretty good to talk about today. So we're going to talk about grief, we're going to talk about reflecting, we're going to talk about coping and adapting and preserving. And we're going to do that all within the context of this new normal. And so I want you to have an open mind as you listen today to the presentation, and to know that we're going to probably touch on some things that really make sense and matter to you, and maybe we'll talk about some things that might be new concepts too. So when we look at this graph right here, it is a model of grief. And as you can see in grief, and I want to apply this to COVID, in this period of time, the pandemic, first there's shock, and then there's denial, frustration, depression, you see in yellow. And then you see experiment, where you're starting to engage in a new situation. You're starting to, we probably are in the experiment level in terms of like trying to go out. Should we wear a mask or not a mask? Are we going to, go on a flight? Are we going to take a family vacation, etc.? And then also in the decision stage. And so we're learning how to adapt in our new normal, what this new environment is. And then the final stage is integration. So you integrate the changes that you've made, and hopefully in this new normal that you're able to get out of it some positive things that have helped you as you've learned to adapt and cope. So navigating a new normal. This time, we are going to take tools that we've learned from doing this with having MS or living with MS, and we're going to apply to how we can navigate this new normal. And the reason why I say this is that I believe that, probably pandemic aside, everybody on this call, every single person, has had to adapt to some new normal. Maybe it's within your diagnosis, maybe it's within changes within your physical ability, maybe it's changes within work. We've had to make a lot of changes and navigate new normals with living with MS. So I wanted to reiterate that you already have some skills and some things that we can tap into as you continue to learn to navigate your new normal. And I also want to mention that this is a collective experience, but it's also an individual journey. So today I'm going to talk about it, a couple of different concepts. You know, we have navigated the pandemic together as a community. One as a community in terms of people living with MS and MS community, but also a community and world at large. But also we see that it's an individual journey, and finding your new normal. It's a part of a collective experience because we're all navigating this, including myself, even Stuart, et cetera. We all are navigating our new normals. But it's also our own journey. So we might sit a little bit differently on certain topics or certain preferences, et cetera. And so I just want to remind you that this is your journey. And while we're journeying together, it's also your journey individually. And so whatever you need to make and decide for yourself for your new normal is your decision and your choice. And that's important. And as we talk about these concepts, I want to also talk about practicing radical self-compassion. So as we talk about the different stages, I would like for you to give yourself space to allow yourself to take care of yourself, to not judge how you feel, to accept where you are in this process, and not compare yourself to where other people are or where you should be. And so as we go through this process, I would really like for you to practice self-compassion and also to for yourself, and then also compassion for others in our community that might be thinking a little bit differently or doing things differently. And so the next thing that we're going to talk about is one of our first stages, grief and loss. This is something that is necessary to talk about, and that's why we're making space for it. During the pandemic, we experienced many, many things that have happened, and that created a sense of grief and loss. For some of us, it was interaction with other people, maybe going to support groups in person, going to educational programs. It might have been for some of us going to a work environment. We have literally lost friends, loved ones, family members, lost at some points the ability to kind of go somewhere and not have to think about wearing a mask, and then all of a sudden having to think about being protected a lot. So there was a lot of grief and loss during COVID, and I think that it's important that we address it within ourselves and talk about it and think about it, because in order to move through, we have to kind of understand it. So, you know, as we navigate the program today, I want you to sort of think about, you know, what things have you, you know, was it family holidays? Was it going to the doctor and seeing the doctor in person? You know, what changes did you experience related to your time during the pandemic, and even now that has affected you in some way? And I want to let you know that grieving is normal. It's healthy, it's normal, it's important, it's a valuable thing to do. It's your response, and it can cause a variety of different emotions. And I want you to allow yourself the time and space to grieve and to even create maybe some things to acknowledge the grief and the loss, the things that you have had to adapt to over the past couple years. So I'm going to show you a visual real quick. I have to grab it. Okay. So this is how I describe grief. And I have to get one more thing, so hang tight real quick. Okay. So this tennis ball right here, we're going to say that this is grief. And this is your experience. So in the beginning, during the pandemic, and even possibly some of you might be here now, when we're affected by grief, it seems like it touches everything. And it feels like often that we're not going to move forward, that things are always going to feel like this. So I remember earlier during the pandemic, I felt this way. I felt like, what is this loss going to always be around us in the same way? And it was hard. But what happens with grief is often we want to, We want to take the tennis ball and we want to get rid of it. And the truth is that that is not healthy, because what happens is that the grief will find its way back in. Certain different point of your life, different time, sometimes expected, sometimes unexpected. So what we can do is, by honoring grief, by working through grief, by giving grief space, and by acknowledging it and talking to someone about it, what happens is that this tennis ball, the grief stays this size. It never shrinks. It's always this size. But you grow around it. So as you can see, over time, we will grow around some of the grief with COVID and some of the things that we've experienced and some of the changes that we've had to make and adjustments. But it's important to pause for a moment and to honor the space with grief and understand and think about, what are you grieving? And the next thing I'm going to share is just a little acronym, and it's a tool for managing grief and loss. You can always go and talk to a counselor. I think even sometimes talking to a peer, friend, talking to a loved one, and just kind of talking to someone who's had a shared experience and just expressing your emotions can be helpful. But we're going to use the acronym HEAL. So H means to honor the loss. So that means kind of to name it, to acknowledge it. And then the E means to express your emotions about it. So if you have had experienced a lot of social isolation, how did it make you feel? Express how it made you feel, how the loss and the change made you feel. And then the A stands for acknowledging the obstacles. So acknowledging the obstacles that you have with the emotions that you've experienced, acknowledging even some of the obstacles of, if your example was, having more social isolation, that it's been harder to interact with people, and it's been harder to reconnect probably in this new normal, trying to figure out what's okay, what's not okay, what do I feel comfortable with, etc. And then the L stands for live. And for that, it means, I interpret it as that you make intentional effort to work with within the grief that you feel, but finding a way to move forward a little bit. And sometimes we have to do that day by day, and sometimes we can do it little by little and bit by bit. But HEAL is a nice acronym for managing grief and loss. And so grieving is important, but also in the developing a new normal. The other thing, I'm sorry, I had a question. I forgot about this. Now, this is not the MS Mental Wellness Chat, but what I want you to do is to kind of think about, what have you been grieving since the pandemic? Has it been interactions with people, places? I've had, some people express grief over certain places being closed or businesses closing, etc. Changes in schedule, your interaction with others, healthcare changes, the way that you go to the doctor, etc. What have you been grieving since COVID? You don't need to put this in the question box, but if I ask you anything and that gets you thinking about another question or something that you want to learn more about, feel free to put that in the question box, and Stuart's going to look at those for us in a little bit. So grieving is an important stage, but so is pausing and reflecting. It's important for, as we develop this new normal, what this new normal is, to think back on our experiences and to reflect on them. We've had a lot of time during the pandemic, to think and reflect, but now that we're kind of settling into a different new normal, it's time to pause and reflect a little bit more. So for you, some things to think about are, what are changes that you've experienced in your MS care? What are some negative changes? And what are some positive changes? I know as I reflect, and I'll just give you my example since I'm the only one that can speak at this point, besides Stuart, is that a negative change that I experienced, it was really hard to get scheduled in to get blood work in the very beginning. And getting into the doctor was really hard, but one of the positive changes is the virtual care was very easy. You know, thinking about what you know, there have been good and bad things as we pause and reflect on our experiences during COVID, but specific to your MS care, what is changes that you've noticed or that you've experienced? And then we have to think about our life, you know, what changes that have occurred in our lives that, and you personally since the pandemic. And I want you to think about, you know, what are some negative changes and what are some positive changes? It's important to bring up both the negative and the positive because the positive, we might decide that we want to keep some of that later. And some of the negative changes might actually be things that we grieve a little bit. And so I want you to think about that, you know, to think about, you know, with pausing and reflecting that that's really an important part of our new normal, kind of developing what that new normal is going to be. And when you do that, that can help you lead you towards coping and adapting. And with coping and adapting, these are, you know, when we start, if you remember that beginning colorful slide in the beginning about grief, that we start to think and come up with experiment, make some changes, and then decide to make changes. So when we are really navigating the emotions of a new normal, I want to remind us that this is going to be different for each of us. This is your own experience. A couple things and suggestions is, you know, thinking about what would you like to do to probably make up some of the things that you've missed? Are there things that you can redo, like we redid a family vacation? Is there a list of things that you can do that you can look forward to? Can you socialize or start slowly? Some people are feeling really guilty about not feeling, you know, just happy about changes and things kind of going back to normal because there's a lot of ambivalence on how to handle it. What's okay, what's not okay. And it's hard because we're having to, some of us are readjusting to old routines. And it's really important to be patient with yourself as you navigate these emotions because they're complicated. You know, I want you to think about the time that, you know, remember when you were diagnosed with MS or that you were going through another life challenge and taking and kind of going through and navigating actually takes a lot of time and a lot of patience with yourself. You know, it's important for as we navigate this new normal that maybe we connect with others and talk about it. It's really important that we do that because we're not alone. And the new normal is not the old normal. And it's hard, but we have to have a mental, you know, be intentional mentally to know that, you know, everything is not going to return as it did before. You know, you may have experienced this with some of the businesses that you've tried to go to, et cetera. I worked with someone recently that was devastated. They were waiting for their gym to come back and reopen, and the truth was their gym's not coming back and reopening. It is in a different capacity, but not the same way. And so we worked on really accepting some of the changes, accepting some of the differences, because the new normal is not the old normal. And the more that we can mentally prepare and embrace the new normal, the better off that we are. Another thing is to And hopefully people have maintained their exercise routines. I'll be honest, I struggled a little bit with that during COVID, and I'm getting back into routines now. But that is helping me to kind of navigate my new normal, is establishing a better exercise routine and habit, and then slowly reconnecting with people. I'm hoping that that many of you on this webinar tonight are starting to connect with others, and are starting to find ways to engage and to do things, even if if you have to do it in a creative way, in a way that you feel comfortable. Now, another tool, and this is more in relationship to I think life. I forgot I added this slide in, so I'm going to talk about this one first. We are pivoting experts. And COVID has given us a couple of gifts, the pandemic. And MS kind of gave this skill to us a little bit before, is that we have learned that we have to kind of pivot and change things sometimes, right? When you're living with MS, you know, your day-to-day can be very different. Your hour-to-hour can be different sometimes. And so we've become a little bit skilled, I think, having a chronic disease, that we've learned how to pivot around things, that we've learned that we can change directions. We might have to change what we're doing sometimes, that we have to have a little bit more internal flexibility and external flexibility as well. And so applying that skill and that trait to yourself is really important, to know that we are pivoting experts. So as you're adapting to your new normal, this is something that you've been doing for a long time, and this is something that you can apply to some of the changes that you've experienced in the past couple years and going forward. And remember that that's something that you can take with you. Now, we're going to talk a little bit about coping with cognitive reframing and restructuring. I'm not going to spend a lot of time here, but I think it's a very resilient skill when we can look at a situation and we can either shift our mindset about it, or we can learn to look at it from a slightly different perspective. And while we cannot change the grief and the loss and those feelings related to COVID, we can absolutely, as we go into this new normal, and as you continue to establish this new normal for yourself, give yourself the opportunity to shift a mindset. I'll go back to the example about the gym that wasn't going to open in the same way. For that person I was working with, it was all or nothing. It was that gym or nothing else. But we worked on shifting our mindset. Maybe there's other gyms in the area, and there were. Maybe that this is an opportunity to possibly participate in a different program, and maybe a possibility to meet some other people too in the process. So shifting your mindset, giving yourself some of the internal and cognitive flexibility will help you as you're adapting to this new normal, because it's all uncharted territory for each of us. And so with that said, I also want to ask you, how have you adapted? Or have you adapted to some of the social changes, or your social needs, your exercise needs, or recreation needs, your work or volunteer work, hobbies, your interests, any modifications? How have you adapted? And do you still need to adapt some of these? For some people, if there's been a lot of ambivalence about going to the movies or doing something that they once really valued and really loved to do, have they been able to make adaptations for that? Have they been able to go back to the movie theater? And if they don't feel comfortable, that's okay, that's understandable. But maybe go to a drive-in movie, or find a different streaming service and have friends all watch it virtually. I don't know. But thinking about, how have you adapted to these needs? And have you made adaptations? And hopefully in some areas you have. And if you haven't in all areas, to not be hard on yourself, because the truth is that this is going to take a little bit of time. Actually, a lot of time for us to kind of fully adapt to our new normal. And while we're adapting, guess what? It's still going to be changing. That's a part of this new normal, I think, is that there's going to be a constant change. And so how can you make adaptations and increase and improve that mental flexibility and mental agility to be able to do that? But just thinking about for yourself, and if you have a pen and paper to write down, you know, like maybe some areas that you've adapted, it's important to acknowledge. And this is hard work to make changes in these areas. So the next thing we're going to talk about is preserving. So there's some things, and I think considerations to conserve. And I'm going to talk about a couple of them, but I also want you to think about for your own situation. While the COVID experience and the pandemic has brought a lot of grief and loss, and we've had to make a lot of changes, and we've had to reflect and think about what we want to keep and get rid of, and it's helped us to prioritize a little bit. There are some things for the MS community, and I think considerations to of things that we should conserve and make a focus to conserve them. Change is hard, but it's an opportunity too, and we can choose and pick and choose some of the things that we would like to keep. I think one example would be virtual educational programs, conferences, support groups, advocacy events. Like all of these things have become very accessible. Now, MS Views and News was ahead of the game. They had a YouTube channel and they would post everything. So everything was technically kind of accessible, and that's amazing. But also, we've seen just collectively a lot of organizations be able to offer these programs, virtually. MS Views and News has done an incredible job at doing this. But there's ways to, be more involved in advocacy. There are just support groups at this point have been virtual. I've presented to several during the past couple years. And there's a greater ability to participate in things. And that's an important consideration, and I hope that this is something that the MS community collectively is going to preserve, but that also you preserve, and that if they offer programs like this, that you continue to attend virtual programs. Now, in-person programs, absolutely when you can and you feel comfortable, but knowing that the world has become a little bit more accessible, which is great. And then there's the hybrid option. So we've seen, for work environments that there has been a little bit of more hybrid, that you can work from home and work in a workspace as well. It's very driven and dependent on your job and your job duties. But then also there's a hybrid option for some programs. I know I presented at a presentation, and it was half hybrid for people that didn't feel comfortable coming in, and then it was also virtual, and so or in person for the people that did feel comfortable. And so there's going to be, I think, for the MS community, we're going to see a little bit more hybrid. But even for MS care, I think that we are going to see some telehealth options stay, where we can have the virtual option as well as the option to see in person. I feel like over the past 6 months to maybe a year that I've been able to kind of select if I felt comfortable going into my doctor or if I wanted it to be a virtual. I think I've had choice in both of those visits. So, but we're going to have more hybrid options, and I hope that's something that we can preserve and that you might preserve as an individual going forward. And then the benefits of mental health care. If anything, during this time, we have learned over and over again that there is a great importance to mental health. And with MS, people with MS are more likely to have depression or anxiety. And it's an invisible part of our disease. But people collectively during the pandemic experienced more mental health challenges, and the need for mental health intervention has been very high. And what we've seen is that mental health can be conducted virtually. For some people, it's not ideal, but it also has made mental health very accessible during this time. So this might be something that that you may personally choose to preserve if you can, but I hope that the MS community continues to preserve as an option, is that mental health care is a lot more accessible. And there's also apps and a lot of resources that you can access, some that you have to pay for and some that you don't, that are directed towards helping people with mental health issues, or directed at helping people learn cognitive reframing tools or cognitive behavioral therapy, etc. So there's a lot of resources out there. And there's been some ease in medical care in terms of the convenience of medical care. So we have seen this. I put some ease because I said it was hard to get my lab work done during COVID, and sometimes it can. It proved to be a little bit challenging to get into the doctor sometimes too, in person anyways. But virtually, it seemed to be a little bit easier. And so we've seen as a MS community that there's been some ease and some benefits to having virtual care or having medical care available on a virtual level. And but this might be some aspect of that you want to preserve. I know if I have a doctor's appointment and I have a vacation planned, I might still keep my vacation and keep my doctor's appointment. But if I have something important, I'm going to want to preserve the in-person appointment as well. And so this is something to consider if it becomes an option for you, that you might be able to benefit and preserve some of the ability to have a more flexible medical visit. And I do think we will see that telehealth will stay to some degree as we continue on our new normal. And then the concept that the world has become just a little bit more accessible. And let's make this stay. I hope we do this through advocacy. I hope we do this through utilizing the options that we have for virtual things, such as like education programs like tonight's program, or utilizing the virtual healthcare that we need, and to know that while the pandemic brought a lot of very difficult things into our lives and a lot of challenges, it also brought a deep and strong awareness of accessibility needs. And through that, we've seen a lot of the more integration of the virtual programs and such. And so my thinking is that the world has become a little bit more accessible, and there's been people that have been able to participate in things that they couldn't have before. And as the MS community, we should find a way to make them stay. And I think one of the ways is utilizing it, one. And I think another way is advocating and continuing to advocate for it, because it's a platform that we have been lucky enough to be exposed to at this point. And so let's keep the things that matter. And so I encourage you, for the things that you see that have been helpful, to continue to use them. And one question I have, and again, this is just something to think about. What are some of the changes that you've made? What will you discontinue? And what things will you keep? We've all made changes during this period of time. And we may choose to keep some things that really have fit and really that have worked in our lives. I'm actually keeping remote work. This is something that I'm surprised I'm keeping, but I'm keeping remote work because it's worked well for my family and for my life. And what will I discontinue? I'm just trying to think of something. I discontinued playing the ukulele because I never really learned that well, but that's not a good example. I will probably discontinue some of the binge TV watching that I did during COVID. Now that I feel like I can get out a little bit more and have been able to travel a little bit more comfortably, that I'm going to discontinue watching TV as much as I was, especially when I felt like I couldn't go anywhere. So what are some changes that you've made? And I know that you have made changes, but I want you to think about, what are things that you kind of just don't, oh, and my virtual Christmas, I hope I don't have to do that again. That was, I would like to discontinue that. But maybe I'll make it hybrid for people. So people that are comfortable can come, and the people that feel are not comfortable or not feeling well don't have to come. So thinking about what changes have you made and what will you discontinue, what will you keep? So the next thing I'm going to share is going back to a slide I talked about earlier on in the beginning, practicing compassion for ourselves and each other. This is a really hard period of time. It's possibly not as hard as it's been a couple years ago up until now, but it's also a time that we are kind of navigating what we feel comfortable with as an individual. And our neighbors, our friends, our MS community, our partners, our support group, our colleagues, et cetera, everybody's navigating this on their own too. So remembering as you're navigating this new normal to be kind to yourself, to practice compassion, to have a fair attitude towards yourself, to don't be critical or judgmental of where you are, to take care of yourself. Rather than, denying your needs or overindulging, just kind of, focusing on, making sure that you're sleeping well and that you're eating well, you're moving some, and you're managing stress. Accepting that that struggle is normal and change is hard, and we have been going through a lot of change. And even if we're specialists at pivoting or we know a lot about change because we've had to adapt before, change is really hard. And that you're not alone in this change. And accept where you are for yourself in that moment and that other people may be in different places. And then practicing mindful awareness. Rather than getting kind of caught up in your thoughts or feelings, take a step back and try to look at them objectively. A good example that I like to give is to give it a helicopter view, because sometimes we're in the weeds and we're just stuck in our emotion. But if we step back and we do a helicopter view, that can help us be a little bit more compassionate towards ourselves and understand our feelings a little bit more. So the question of the hour might be, when do we know we have reached a new normal? My goodness. I think that there's not a finish line here at all. I think that we are here in our new normal, and there's going to continue to be changes. Hopefully not as big and not as drastic or dramatic as they have been over the past couple of years, but I do think we've reached our new normal, and I think that there's no finish line here. So we're going to have to continue to adjust and acclimate and find within ourselves what we're comfortable with and what we want this next part of our post-pandemic future to look like. And I think that's important. So if we're looking for like a finish line or a goal or a trophy we get at the end, I wish we all could get. I don't think we're going to get it. I just think that what we need to do is just to know that you are already adjusting to your new normal. There's probably things that you might need to work on and that you want to focus on, but you're doing well at it, and it's important to know that this is a hard thing to do, and it takes time, but things are kind of always going to change. And the one thing that you can do is use your experience of living with MS and the flexibility that you've had to utilize over the years and apply it to this as well, because with MS, we are constantly having to adjust our new normals. So I wanted to move on to any questions or bring Stuart back on. I'm done a little bit earlier than expected, but I'm sure we might have a question or two.
That is great. That was fantastic. That was so good that I want to give you a standing ovation, but I can't. Okay? If I do, everything will fall down around me, but we got changes to make, right? Okay, so that was really, really great. I feel so good that I listened to this whole thing because it's really fabulous. And I'm sure that everybody that's been online tonight feels that way as well. And so we're going to get right into our questions. But I did want to say that, as far as changes, as far as things go, you made mention of MS Views and the amount of virtual programs we do, and we will continue. We're not making any changes to that. We will continue, with these virtual programs because, like you said, there is a great need for it. But in addition to the virtual programs, I am also back on the road doing live programs. But while we're doing these live programs, all of these live programs are now also hybrid, as they call it. We're streaming them out so that way people that can't be there, that are locally, can just watch it online, and those from around the country and in various portions of the world can see it as well. I want to let you know that there are people online tonight from 4 countries, I actually think, but I'll have to check the fourth later on. All right, but this is part of that new normal. It's part of what got people together. It's, using the internet. I mean, fortunately, very, very fortunately, that, this pandemic happened now and not, 30 years ago. Mm-hmm. So, we have the power of the internet. We can, provide people with what they need. All right. First question from a Maria. She writes, what an excellent description of grief. My grief has been about the fear of contracting COVID. So, what do you do for people that have and live with this fear on a regular basis?
I think that's a real fear. And I'm going to knock on wood. I haven't got COVID myself, and it is, a consideration, and it is something that many people are fearful about. I think it's really important to talk with your medical professionals about how to protect yourself. We know that the masks are one way that we can do that. We know that also not everyone is wearing a mask, right? But we know that wearing a mask can be helpful. Also, I think it's important to stay up to date and abreast of the COVID strains as they change some, and so the medical community has different opinions, and talking with your doctor about it. There's also you could talk with some of the people that you're interacting with. So if you're going to a family event, and it would make you comfortable if everybody gets tested for COVID. There was something I did recently where everybody had to get tested for COVID before we hung out. And that was great. And that was a way to cope with, address really an anxiety. I can't give you a stamp that I'll never get COVID or you won't, but I know that it's really important to talk with your medical professionals about it, to make sure that you're protecting yourself as you can, and then also to make sure that you're doing things that integrate you, help you live well in other ways, like some socialization, some stress management, interacting with others. So that's my advice. But it's a hard feeling, and I think it's something that a lot of people share.
Thank you. All right, next one is I've become disciplined in doing yoga at home from poses that I know by heart from many years of class. One benefit is that I've become more adept at online computer tech scenarios. Well, that's great, because anybody who didn't know computers beforehand should greatly know it now, right? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, that is super great. One of the benefits of some yoga poses is that it calms the vagus nerve down, and this is important to mention. And what happens is when you calm your vagus nerve down, you connect with your parasympathetic nervous system that actually relaxes your body and calms your body. Exercise is so much more available, and yes, we have all become a lot more savvy. I have watched so many people, older in age, people that were so not confident with the computers, become many tech geniuses to be able to problem solve and figure things out.
That's quite true, quite true. So, the day-to-day, I'm going to bring up me. I mean, for instance, I live in Florida. Everybody knows about Florida these days because of what DeSantis did and, taking down the mask laws and everything else. But, we have people speaking at our programs that ask me, what are we doing about mask mandates at our programs? And I said, we can't order a mandate because we're not a government, all right? And so, I can only go by what's going on in each state. So the bottom line is, those for the presenters, they're on a stage. They're on the stage, and they're, far back from where the people are. And I can only put out for everybody attending the programs that we ask that you do wear a mask, but it's not something that we can mandate. So it's up to each individual of what they do. I personally will wear a mask when I'm out there doing Q&A with everybody, because I want to feel protected. But on top of that, nobody's allowed to ask a question or use the microphone. They can't use the mic. Only I hold the mic. But they can't even ask a question unless they're wearing a mask, or if they take their napkin and they hold it up in front of their face. And that's something that we are, strict about at our programs, and we will continue to be, because whether it's COVID or not, I don't need your common cold either. So it's something that we've learned, from all the COVID. It's just how to protect yourself and wash your hands when you get home. Everybody, wash your hands when you get home. All right, it's very important. I still do that. All right, next, we have a person that writes, these days I'm feeling a loss of availability of able-bodied friends who were home during the height of COVID. Now they're out and about and not so interested in Zooming. What do I do?
Okay, that's a really good strategy. What I'm going to ask you, one, is to consider communicating with them. Because clearly there's changes. People's routines are people that worked remotely might have been more available or less available. A lot of people are traveling now. We see that. So people are not as accessible or available. But I think it's important, what we all appreciated was those connections during COVID, right? During the pandemic, and how important and probably valuable it was to them. And I think it's important to voice that, and to let the people know that we're really important to you. Can we make time? Can we make a scheduled time to have a Zoom call? I know you're busy and you're out and about and doing things, but this is something I need to preserve and something you should preserve too, because it was important to you during COVID.
Great, thank you for that. Elizabeth writes, is there recommended support for people with MS who may need emotional or social support throughout this time?
There is a lot of resources. I think mental health awareness has been very big during the time of COVID. What I would recommend for you to do, Elizabeth, if you're in the United States at least, is to contact United Way 211 and to get some resources of some mental health resources in your area, and they can be very specific to your area. Also, some of the MS organizations might have some access. We have actually, there was a program that I did, I'm trying to think, it was a while ago, called Home But Not Alone. It was during Christmas time. And I talked a little bit about mental health care and how to access some care during that program too. But look and see what's in your community, and there are resources available. It might not be exactly in your community, but there is something either virtually or something that would be relatively close in your state. I'm sure that's available.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. Another person writes, what precautions should I still be taking?
This is something that I think it's important to, pay attention to the CDC, talk with your doctor about what you're comfortable with. Also knowing your own situation. Have you had your boosters? What medications do you take? Are you immune compromised? Are you not? I think these are all very individual questions. I know that I have a conversation with my doctor about my risk level, and that's kind of helped me to make decisions on when and how I wear masks, etc. And I think these conversations need to continue as kind of the new strains come out, and you need to find a comfort level within yourself of after talking with your healthcare professionals about what feels right for you.
Great, thank you. For the world to know, I had COVID twice. First time was in January, and it was pretty harsh. The second time was a couple months ago, and Jessica, you were down here at that time. So, that was more like I didn't even know. And that's what a lot of people are walking around with, that they don't even know. So that being the case of people not even knowing, all those that have the fear of COVID know about all those people that are just walking around not knowing what they have or don't have. And that's their fear, is that, somebody that may think that they have an allergy or absolutely nothing wrong with themselves, or maybe they have a relative a grandchild that may have just had COVID. What are they doing for themselves? Because they say, well, I'm vaccinated, I'm not going to get it. But even though they're vaccinated, they can still carry it. And that's what a lot of people don't understand. So what do you say about that?
I think you're right. That you just don't know, and you don't know. I was flying home. I gave the example. I had my mask on, but the person coughed behind me, and my hair moved. He coughed, and I thought, oh my gosh, we live now in a society where coughing is horrible, no matter what. But I felt unnerved by it, and because you just don't know. And so I think it's important to be very mindful of, of what you can do, but also to know that you can still do everything right, and COVID is still out there.
That's right. That's right. So when you got home, did you wash your hair?
No, but I did put it in a bun and I went to bed because I got home too late.
Okay, no problem. All right, Cindy's writing a long dialogue, question, and etc. So I'm about to read this, all right? I have just started to act, and by the way, before I read anything from Cindy, I want to let everybody know there are a lot of you online. I'm sure you have questions, all right? If you have a question, now's the time to ask, because in 10 or 15 minutes from now, it's going to be too late. That door is going to shut, the program's going to close, and you're not going to get your question answered. All right, so ask your question. Okay, thank you. All right, Cindy writes, I have just started to actually try to reconnect with people I lost touch with over the last 3 years. It became clear to me that I got set in my ways of isolation. Obviously, not emotionally healthy. That being said, thank you for addressing this issue. I'm so happy to have taken the step to reach out, and it has become much more clear to me. Her question's so long, I can't even see the bottom of it. Hold on a second. Oh my God, I gotta lengthen my screen here. Hold on. So she writes, I'm so happy to have taken the step to reach out, and it has become so much more clear to me who I want to spend any bit of my time with. I won't waste a single spoon on just anyone. The silver lining of my isolation, I suppose, is learning more about myself. What do you think about that?
I think that's great. I think that it sounds like that one of the things that you want to preserve is true, real friendships, and maybe some of the friendships that you can see that don't matter, are not going to be what you want to preserve. And the truth is if we all learn something about ourselves, and that's really the stages that I talked about, then if you come out of this process, like preserving things, adapting and changing some things, grieving some things, really reflecting, learning yourself, you're winning here.
Okay, thank you very much. Next one is from an Elizabeth. What activities do you recommend for people with MS to try now that COVID restrictions have lifted? What activities do you recommend for people with MS to try now, since COVID restrictions have lifted?
So I think it depends on your comfort level, right? Like my family went on a cruise. That is not everybody's comfort level at all. So I think for some people, activities might be doing something outdoors. I live in North Carolina. It's hot. It's not conducive for people outdoors to do things right now this week anyways. But it might be sitting out in a well-ventilated space. It might be going to out with one friend for lunch, kind of doing small steps. One, you have to keep your MS in consideration, and then you have to also keep, your concerns, about COVID and et cetera. But I would say your baseline is you should talk to your healthcare provider, and then you should find your comfort level and maybe take small steps. I wouldn't do a big jump. If you're not comfortable, don't go take a cruise. That could be it was kind of weird to experience being around that many people.
Go to Atlanta Airport. You'll be around that many people. You'll get used to it.
There you go. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Melissa writes, it's best to always remember that we can only control ourselves and our prevention actions. Very good, Melissa. I agree with that too.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Go on. Sorry for that. What summer activities do you have for people?
So, I think it depends on where you live, but, in North Carolina, swimming is a big deal. If you have a pool in Florida, you guys have way more pools than we do. Other summer activities sometimes are indoors. So I might, a lot of my socialization wraps around being kind of inside with a friend. So I might go out to get coffee with a friend, or I might invite them over. I find definitely craft hobbies and things like that to do it inside. But I think in the summer, it really depends on where you live, what your heat tolerance is. There was a time in my life that heat never bothered me. That's not my reality now. So it depends on your individual experience with MS as well. But and talk with other people with MS. Find out what they do in the summer. I know I spend a lot more time in the summer outside in the evenings because it's cool enough. Whereas I might have a friend that has MS and she feels okay outside in the sun during the day. I think it's very individual.
Right, it is quite individual. And here I am, I feel like the sun's been beating the crap out of me lately. And then I say, you know, is it what it really is it? I mean, it's not that I sheltered down for too long, because I sure didn't. Not to say that that's right or wrong, everybody, all right? It's not one way or the other. It's just the way that I live my life. And even though I didn't shelter down, I was still away from the masses. I was away from people, all right? And I did protect myself all the time. There's a lot of space out there. You know what I'm saying? I mean, people were afraid to leave their front doors, and yet nobody lived around them for, you know, they could live on a lot that was 2 acres and they were afraid to go out in their grass. I mean, that was just crazy to me. All right. Anyway, next person. Next person's writing, Kevin writes, folks on DMTs that cause us to be immune compromised. How comfortable are you that we gain much long-lasting protection from vaccines and boosters?
I'm not a medical professional in that sense. I'm a mental health professional, and it does make me completely uncomfortable that some people with MS don't have the protection that the vaccines and the boosters can give them. That some people can get protection, some people don't because of the medication that they're on, and at the same time. So I don't want to weigh an opinion. I think it's so important individually that if you are on a medication that you are more compromised, that you talk with your healthcare provider, and you can bet your bottom dollar that I will be 100% respectful, and I will care deeply and wear a mask and be very cautious with you. But in our communities, we develop a new normal. It's important for your loved ones to know. It's important for people that you, if you're compromised, if your immune system is more compromised and you cannot get the same protection through the vaccines, et cetera, to tell the people that love you, and because that way they know how to protect you as well.
Okay, thank you for that. Kevin, just so you know, and for others that are on B-cell depleters, speak with your doctor, your neurologist specifically, about Evusheld. E as in Edward, V as in Victor, U as in umbrella, S as in Sam, H as in Harold, E as in Echo, L as in Lewis or Lima, and D as in Delta. Okay, you need to speak with them about this. It could be the game changer for you. And I'm not a doctor to say anything more than what I just did. And so really speak with your neurologist about this.
Stuart, right. Thank you for sharing that, because that is something I've been hearing as well.
Great. Okay, next, I only have 2 questions remaining. One is, how do I go about living with this virus as it continues to plague the world? I think you've been speaking about this all night.
I have. I think how you continue to do it is you be patient with yourself, and you take small steps, and we're all in this together as we do this. One thing I did want to mention is the idea of exposure therapy. And exposure therapy is something that's used in counseling often when there's like phobias or anxieties, et cetera. But I think it's very relative to this period of time right now. So as you're learning to get out in the community to do things, start small, do things on a small level. And so that way you can build a little bit of confidence. Okay, I went outside of my door and I sat outside in the front porch and I waved at my neighbors, and that felt good. And so maybe next time, instead of the grocery delivery, I'll at least pull up and drive my car a little bit so I can get some sunshine while I do that. And then you build from some of the experiences. COVID is still going to be there, but that exposure therapy really gives you the confidence and to start small.
I'll tell you one thing, that traveling on the roads during COVID was awesome. I was the only one out there.
I know.
Especially in the beginning days of it. It was like me and the cops, and that was it. And somebody says, you're going to get arrested for being out there. And I said, for why? You can't get arrested. There was no martial law. If it was martial law, it would have been a different story.
Yeah.
All right. Kevin is writing again. Is anyone else the only person wearing a mask in the grocery store? I really don't understand what that means, but.
Well, so this is, what and this goes to kind of that radical self-compassion, right? I think everywhere you go, there's the majority are not wearing masks, but there's a really good majority, and a great handful of people are. And
right.
I know everywhere I go, I have a mask with me, and it just depends on my comfort level in the moment. And for me, and where I'm at, and et cetera. And so I think you do find that you may feel like you're the only one wearing a mask. Sometimes you may, that's what it kind of sounds like the question might be about, is that you might feel like you're the only one in the grocery store. But I do think that if you look around and pay attention, you probably will eventually see more people with masks on. But then more than anything, this idea of this radical self-compassion, being very compassionate to the people that are wearing masks, respectful to them, and to the people that have decided not to as well. And we've got to find a way to navigate both of these sides.
That's quite correct. And again, in Florida, okay, depending on where you are in Florida, as well as any other state, depending on where you are in the state, depends on how many people are actually wearing masks going out to the stores. And it's like nothing these days. I mean, nobody looks or says or even looks badly at somebody that is wearing a mask versus somebody not wearing a mask. It is all individualized at this point in time. So, do what you do and be comfortable about it.
And I think that's something that we'll see kind of as something that will be preserved, is that I bet that people are going to wear masks more when they don't want to catch a cold, or you're going to see more people wearing it sporadically and situationally, just to help protect other people or help protect themselves. So right. I think that will be something that will stay, is that we'll have masks going forward.
All right, great. Well, I'm out of questions. I do want to thank you for being here. I want to thank everybody that was online. We had like 80-something people online tonight. So that was pretty awesome in itself. And it says that, the virtual programs are here to stay. And I do want to thank everybody that was online. And again, let's thank Jessica. Awesome.
Thank you, everyone. And I wish you well as we all continue to move forward on our new normal.
Great. Good night.